man speaking in the city square, trying to tell somebody that he cares. Can you blame the voice of youth for asking what is true? Yeah, the ones that you're calling wild are gonna be the leaders in a little while, when will the lonely voice of youth cry what is true? This our world's waking to a newborn babe, and I solemnly swear it'll be their way. You better help that voice of youth find what is true. And the lonely voice of youth cries, what is true?
All right. Welcome on in, everybody. We're going to have a great time because I've got my Sampel. I hope you do as well. I've got my Muppet Cup. Have you considered? Have you? You should. You can buy a Muppet Cup, by the way. They're very good. Everybody should buy one. And I got some tea from the Table Rock Tea Company. I've got a Carolina Lapsang. Smells delicious. Needs a little more brew time, but that's okay. So much stuff going on this week. It's just completely whack. Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's so many news stories and conspiracy theories and people with low IQ takes, and I gotta tell, one of these days I'll do a video on this. It's getting easier, right? Like some of these videos I've been able to do for 2 years, I'm like, oh yeah, here's the right set of examples. Examples are harder to find, but with things speeding up and chaos increasing, if things are not going to get better. Sorry. Then the examples come fast and furious because you get examples of everything every day practically now. It doesn't matter what it is. Of course, you can't see all that, so fair enough. If you think that two people being at the same military base is some kind of connection, I got news for you. Lots of people at military base. Now, did they work together? Like, that's a different thing. But like, if someone tells you that, you should ignore them. Probably everything they say, because either they don't understand how many people there are at a military base, in which case they probably don't understand lots of things, or they're trying to sell you something. That's always possible. It's trying to sell you some concept that they have. Or it's quite possible that they're dumb. They're really dumb. They really just don't understand why that's not a valid connection. In which case, they probably shouldn't be trusted to anything. And what we're experiencing now is a collision of conspiracies. Right? More chaos equals, and I know this is counterintuitive, but actually mathematically proven. Nassim Taleb talks about this, I think. Basically, the more randomness you have, the more chaos you have, the more order emerges from it. Now, that doesn't mean it's rational. It just means that patterns are inevitable. That's all it means. It doesn't mean anything else. It's not It's not meaningful. Yes, the more stuff going on, more coincidences are going to happen. More strings of coincidences are going to happen. It's going to be harder to tell the good stuff from the bad stuff. So limitations sort of flood in uh, once you realize the guy you were following or the YouTube channel you were on had one solution to one problem, which didn't solve all the other problems, right? Or worse, created 10 more problems that are worse, right? And so the big objection we've had going on is, well, punishing people is tricky because how do you know if you get the punishment right? So let's just not punish anybody. And then you get 100x more crime. Right. And so that was a solution. It was just a terrible solution. And so we see this flood of people sort of outside their lane, so to speak. So something I read actually today on Aaron McIntyre's Twitter. I man, he's another one of those guys. I'm just like, why? Why do you do this? He was quoting Curtis Yarvin, right? So these selective examples are now the norm, right? Curtis Yarvin explains that always and everywhere, the state seeks to shape the public mind. Um, A. So does everything else. The sun rises in the east. Same import. Gravity holds you to the ground. Same import. We're really not dealing with a high IQ take here. I'm sorry. Uh, B. That is the state's job. The state manages what public is and how to be public. That's what it does. That's its function. It's supposed to do that. So it's worse. A implied it was bad. B says either you're selling something or you're really dumb. I don't know which. I don't care. C established that this statement that you made about the state shaping to seek the public mind is bad. Otherwise, again, you're saying something equivalent to gravity just told us to Earth, or colors are real, or I have an arm, or we breathe air. And then we listen to these people, and I God save us from ourselves. Like, why would you listen to somebody making a dopey statement like that? And I get it. Like a lot of people were or are still fooled by these, and almost everyone's doing stuff like that now. I don't know the number of like Keith Olbermann's a famous one, right? Sports guys that went into politics, and I'm like, can't just apply the rules of sports reporting to political reporting for lots of very good and completely obvious reasons, but whatever. And then people follow them. I'm like, why are you following this sports person? And some of them don't even know sports that well, which is even worse. If I know your sport better than you do, you're in a lot of trouble. A lot. But, I guess if we don't have like a clear, good, true, and beautiful exemplar to mimic, we find something else. So then it's worth talking about, why do we mimic? And let me make my case here. First, the world is big, in fact, huge. Sounds like an earlier live stream. And you are tiny. You're a Muppet. It's a Muppet. You're born into this thing. It's clearly bigger than you. The world is freaking ginormical. And second, there are a lot of things you can do. Why not do the things that seem to work? How do you know what works? Well, see what others do that works. Third, it's more efficient to copy things than make it for yourself from scratch. Fourth, well, looking at one thing at a time seems like a choice. You have to copy from something for all the things you do not want to pay attention to, or you cannot pay attention. So it may seem like, oh, I want to be successful, and therefore I'm going to mimic this one person, right? And that's a choice that I made about what I'm mimicking and my exemplar. But there's so many other things you do. You have to be copying those templates from somewhere. You're not self-generating most of the things in your life from scratch and sitting down and thinking about them all. That's not happening. And fifth, this mimicry, this copying of things, it already happened to you. You've already been doing it. Already. Too late. Your parents gave you models that you are still following. And those commercials about becoming your parents. Right. And how do you think you know how to act at a certain age? You're either mimicking the people around you because that's what you have, or you're mimicking people you saw in the past when they were that age. You model your parents. Your parents were 30 when you were growing up. When you're 30, you're going to be a lot like your parents. And there are some exceptions to that. We'll get into that later. There are exceptions, though. Don't be thinking you're the exception. By definition, most people aren't the exception, and that almost certainly includes you. You should never want to be the exception. That's really not a good plan. It's going to cause you more pain in your life than you need have. So, in essence, mimicry is a shortcut to making your own models, say from scratch, rationally, with your conscious mind, or however you want to frame it. Right? That's part of what it is. And why make up models of behavior when others already have them? And all the better if they've been handed down for decades or hundreds of years or thousands of years, because then they're more likely to work. They've been working. And the thing is, mimicry is a form of the fruits of distributed cognition through time. John Mimicry talks about distributed cognition. He never seems to put it in time because he's compressing the world. Time's one of the things he compresses. And all science compresses time, they have to. And so when you do that, though, you can end up with weird side effects like you don't recognize distributed cognition. If it's real, if you stretch it out through time, that has profound implications. Like the Bible's the smartest book ever written. It would have to be, and the most up to date in a way for the things it's talking about. Would also be that these patterns we can't get around because they're literally everywhere, all over the place in culture and other cultures, and they come and go, but they always come back. In order they're not replaceable with other things that reliably come back. Yeah, I mean, that's all distributed cognition through time telling you these are true or real patterns in the world. It's what's happening. So, guess what else? Movement conveys several orders of magnitude more information than speech can ever will be able to under any circumstances. Don't even try to quote fix that. It's not a problem. It's not something that can be fixed. The best way to get along with others is to go along, to get along, to mimic them. And mimicry is leverage enough to operate at a greater scale. Two people can't lift the boulder, but maybe four can. One person certainly can. You want to build a building? How many people do you need? A lot of that's just mimicry. How do you put out a fire with a bucket brigade? A lot of mimicry. And this concept's everywhere in engineering and computers. How do you build a digital circuit? Well, with a handful of digital logic gates, ands, nands, ors, XORs, stacked up and then called something different, but also, right? What about engineering? Well, you take a wire, you take another wire, take another wire, take another wire, you keep doing that. And then you make these much larger wires. And you take a bunch of those, and you make a bundle out of them, and that's how you make a suspension bridge. Or at least that's one way. You're just mimicking the pattern over and over and over again. Do you ever see a bunch of parts stacked up to do something? This is the same principle as mimicry. It's literally the same thing. It's exactly, actually identical. And so I tease this in the title. Let me touch on Girard for a bit. Why is Girard popular right now? It's a good question, right? But it's actually because he's talking about the two most important but least discussed and important, you know, interesting topics of today: mimicry and sacrifice. Now, the issue with Girard, aside from being a Gnostic crazy person, um, I mean, explicitly, like just listen to his David Cayley interview and take notes, listen closely. How he massages the words and changes what he's saying each time he talks about it. One word at a time, right? Same sentence, one word. It's that. It's not quite that, but it's that sort of a pattern. He does that. He's very good at it. There's no such thing as a French intellectual. This is the problem. Everybody thought that was a thing. That's never been a thing. It will never have been a thing. Um, but the issue is he talks primarily about sacrifice as scapegoat, and he makes it negative with extreme consequence, right? And he's doing that to describe something rather specific and tie it back to something rather specific, which is a flattening of the world, and it's completely unnecessary, right? And he talks about mimicry alongside with desire, okay? Which incidentally is totally wrong. We have psychological tests. He's just wrong. I don't know what else to say. You don't need to test. You can just watch the world and you'll see that, yeah, there's an element of mimicry everywhere, but it's not real consistent and it's not super reliable. Um, and it doesn't have the effect that he talks about, right? Because he basically uses this mimetic desire to explain violence, right? As if that's the only cause of violence, which, by the way, it's not. Um, and then he links it to scapegoating, right? With a quick stop off at war, just so it seems like he's explaining some otherwise inexplicable thing. And this is sort of his whole thesis, which is weird because the contrarians really like this, right? Probably because they think they're above it or something. And you're not above mimicry, and you shouldn't be above sacrifice. And maybe you need to be a scapegoat to make the world a better place. Or maybe we need a scapegoat. I don't know. I mean, I think this is where Peugeot's tied up. But and it's hard to tell from listening to Girard where he falls on all this, because he doesn't actually he kind of indicates this is all bad, mimetic desire is bad, but he doesn't give you a solution. He just says Christ solves everything. It's like, well, I agree, but nothing's changed about your systems. The other tricky plays is he implies at least that Christ's sacrifice is the thing that somehow stops scapegoating. And of course, that's all the things he's describing. He's using modern examples, telling you they're also in the past. Big shock, Captain Obvious. And then implying that when Christ does his sacrifice, he's the ultimate scapegoat. He scapegoats for a different reason, and therefore the pattern's broken because now everybody can see it. Yeah, but you gave us modern examples, so that didn't happen. Oops. Yeah, the guy's a bundle of contradictions. And if you guys want, I can, if some people who really want to know about Girard or whatever, I can go into more detail when I'm done with what I'm doing here. My notes are up, so I can grab them. So now that I've made my case, let's suppose that mimicry is a real thing and that you're kind of subject to it and you really don't have a choice. You're going to mimic something about something, right? Um, what are we copying? And well, I mean, it's what we see in the world. And that could be an exemplar, in the form of a person, right? So let's just start there, right? Because we all started there as children. So let's just do a little thought experiment here. Suppose you held up as an exemplar, or say a set of exemplar, uh, individual heroes with powers, say derived from material, maybe requiring money or requiring special birthplace or whatever. What would you expect the people to try to do in the society? And maybe not all of them, because they're not all going to look at the same exemplars or whatever, right? What goals do you think they would have? Are stories with characters that exemplify a certain way of being all myths? No, no, they're not. We can argue about myth, right? But I'm going to say myth is just above story, right? It's above story. And if you do not have a mythos, one will be provided to you without your knowledge or consent, right? I mean, this is part of the can't get rid of religion. Can't get rid of those religious patterns. Of course, I have a video on that. Maybe I'll remember to link it here. But more on all that later. We'll get back to that because that's kind of a fun, but it's a fun little bug in your ear, if you will. So notice a few things, however. Exemplification doesn't have to be positive. And humans all the time go into the I want to be just like my mother, or I don't want to be anything like my mother, right? Within the same family. And they grew up with the same mother. What's going on? So negative exemplification is possible, and resisting the exemplar is also possible, right? Because you're like, oh, some of these exemplifications are bad, and therefore I don't want to copy them. Yes. Uh, However, as I sort of hinted at previously, it might be impossible to escape, at least some exemplification of your parents, because what other model do you have? Some people have other models that, that happens, but by and large, you don't. And therefore, these, stories of how not to live might be important, not just the ideal way to live, right? And in fact, they might be more important because evolution only requires negative signals, doesn't require positive signals. It only requires negative signals because it's a continuation. It's not an end state designator. And even if it was, to the extent those are positive signals, they're limited. The number of negative signals is way larger, more bad than there is good. Doesn't matter if you say evolution, that principle still holds. Now, as you might have noticed, I took you from person to story as exemplification. So, what about these stories that aren't myths? Well, it's just a lesser quality grand narrative at some point, and the grand narrative is just the story on top at the end of the day, at least as described, right? It's a common trick to leave out the requirement for something and pretend therefore you can do without it, right? That's the same trick that the socialists use. I have a video on that. Same pattern, right? It's the exact same pattern. Duh. Same pattern. They just kind of leave it out, right? The so-called postmodernists, they leave out the fact that you can't get rid of a grand narrative. You can only switch grand narratives. That's it. You're not going to live outside of this grand narrative thing. And their goal is to destroy myth, because all the exemplars in myths are either very shiny positive or very shiny negative. And if you're a bad person, you don't want that. I agree. If I were a bad person, I also wouldn't want that. Also, I try not to be a bad person, so I'm fine with it. So let's look at some comic book stories to see what we find in terms of exemplification. And I'm over reducing, like, I get that. I'm trying to be very specific about a specific point, right? I'm not trying to give you an explanation for these things that is complete or anything. That's not what this is for. It would take too long and it's boring. Superman is nurture versus nature, where nurture subsumes nature entirely and then is hidden. Anonymity plays a big role in this. And that's going to be next week's topic, right? This role of the anonymous and the impossibility of that ridiculousness. And you can't really talk about that without talking about this first. Batman is overcome nature with material via money through technology and personal excellence, which is barely talked about and mostly implied, by the way. That's interesting. Also, Batman has it both ways. A wealthy billionaire, looks like a playboy, lives the playboy lifestyle, but is exemplifying virtues as a hidden character, much like Superman. Spider-Man's nature subsumed by magic, forcing maturity. And look, I mean, I could go on here, but know what is happening and what happens when you, who does not live in a comic book, tries to act as if you do. LARPing, anyone? Where do NPCs come from? Well, you have to be an NPC about something, maybe about a bunch of things. And you've just never thought about it. Why do you go to the grocery store and buy food, NPC? Another thing you mimic in the world is the world, right? The stuff around you. Animals, plants, water, building. Buildings are important. In the martial arts, they've got a bunch of stuff around, tiger poses and drunken boxing and forms named after animals, techniques named after animals, and they're useful. And it's the thing, what you see around you impacts you to a great degree. No exemplars of beauty? You won't be able to participate in learning about why beauty is important and how beauty is important. Your environment matters. It shapes you, right? Your environment shapes you. First and primarily, bigger and here first. Your environment was here first. Your environment is bigger than you are. And then you shape it. It shapes you and you shape it. It has a large effect on you. You have a small effect on it. Very asymmetrical. And hopefully for the better. But you best work at that. And it's nature, nurture, and environment. Oops. All that binary thinking destroyed in an instant. Oh. Is it not good? It's not good. All right. I need to continue this, but I have something I need to deal with first. I will be right back.
Young girl dancing to the latest beat has found new ways to move her feet, and the lonely voice of youth cries, what is blame the voice of youth for asking what is true. Yeah, the ones that you're calling wild are gonna be the leaders in a little while. When will the lonely voice of youth cry, what is true? This our world's waking to a newborn babe, and I solemnly swear it'll be their way. You better help that voice of youth find what is true. And the lonely voice of youth cries, what is true?
And we're back. Sorry about that. Okay, now I'm back. All is well with the world. Let's have some water first. So, given where we are at and what we've learned about mimicry, let me show you the problem of today from a different angle. So, in the age of gnosis, where knowledge is propositions is the highest value, we mimic propositions. And, you know, that's not great. Right? And the thing with propositions is that they can come from two different places. Right? You can get propositions from your observation of the world, right? Say that's a cup. Or you can get it from your imagination. That's a unicorn. And some people, they aren't good at observation. Observation's not some reliable, objective material reality trick to get around the problem of observation itself, as the scientists would have you believe, by the way, because that's what they seem to believe. And a lot of people, like, they see the world, right? But they interpret it poorly. And that has profound implications for mimicry. So you can get a story. I can get the same story. We can read it at the same time in the same place and get very different ideas off of that story. Because it's transmitted using propositions. And if it's written, there's an observational filter over the propositions. That's not bad. And plus, we have a limited perspective, right? A limited and unique perspective. It's one of the, like, everybody's worried about individualism. Look, you have a limited and unique perspective. That should be good enough. That's not a good sign for mimicry, right? Because you don't know what you're mimicking. I've already shown that, I think. And that's why we need other people and other people to help us, to tell us, like, huh, what am I mimicking? Is this a good thing to mimic? How well am I doing at mimicking it? And that's the thing. We don't mimic what we see. We mimic what we think we see. And we often interpret what we see incorrectly. And people online, for example, are more prone to mimic things. They are told, because that's what online is. It's a bunch of propositions, really. I mean, you can sit there and say videos aren't propositional, but they are. Right? And they're being driven by the propositions behind the person doing the video. Video editing may not be a plus. Right? You're getting a very curated view of the world. And the thing is, you're online, you've already got a rich imagination, you're imagining it in your heads that that's also in the real world, right? And then additionally, you can always mimic the wrong thing or mimic something good the wrong way or incorrectly. This is difficult indeed. And I think that explains a lot of what you're seeing. A lot of what you're seeing, as I pointed out in the beginning, is just people mimicking things poorly. And maybe a fun way to see mimicry is to realize that you can map story moves people right into academia using the following formula. White papers are their mythos, right? Using elite language or jargon, right? To convince other elitists to follow their story, come to the same story conclusions that they did. That's effectively what's happening in academia. And it's what Eric Weinstein complains about. Oh, there was a system and people gamed the system. So I know we need to get rid of gatekeepers. No, that'll get rid of the system. And then you won't have anything. Why don't you just get better gatekeepers? Right. The other reason why you need mimicry is because you can't destroy some system that's been built up over hundreds or thousands of years and replace it with something you thought up yesterday or you and your three smartest friends thought up yesterday. That's not going to work. Come on. It's a lot of what we're seeing that's causing the chaos. I'm just going to transition from sports into news reporting. No, you're not. That's absurd. Every once in a while, one person pulls it off, but are you mimicking them? Can you? Can you mimic Elon Musk? Because people always focus on his smartness. And I've said this before. I always say, you ever slept at your desk at work, under your desk at work? And they're like, what? No, I would never do that. I'm like, then you can't have Elon Musk's money, dude. It's not that hard. Silence every time, by the way, complete silence. Like, oh my God, the world doesn't work the way I think it does. No, it doesn't at all. You had a flat view. And the thing is, it's easy to fool people, right? You can tell people tyranny is bad, right? And telling you what to do is bad, right? You'll reject hierarchy because those two things are inevitably linked together, right? Which will lead you to equality doctrine, right? Which leads you to lowest common denominator. And now you're woke. Every single time. It doesn't even matter where you started. It makes no difference. And there's all these patterns that people are mimicking sort of all the time. Right? A lot of people are doing charity anonymously to be better, but that's a lie. It's actually a psyop from Satan, for real. We'll go over that next week. Anonymity, we'll go over that next week. Right. And then of course everyone's gonna whine, right? They're gonna say like, well, in this one particular case that I heard about that might even be real, or usually it's a fantasy case that can't exist in the real world, but they can come up with it in their heads because unicorns. Uh, it could be useful. It's like, oh, okay, but one exception does not a rule make. It may prove the rule, but it does not make a new rule. Oops. And the thing is, mimicry is required. You have to mimic things because it allows you not to think about a bunch of things, but still participate usefully. That's what it allows you to do. Inventing new sports is a great example of mimicry of a pattern. Esports is an example. So is American Ninja, I think it's called, right? So it's some of these other things where they send people across these obstacle courses, right? It's sort of a mix between a regular obstacle course and a real sport because you've got medals, right? So always sometimes copying different parts and pieces, trying to put them together. Remember I said there's more chaos? Where do you think it's coming from? People thinking they can put things together arbitrarily. That creates chaos. We know what works and what doesn't work. And nothing works perfectly. And that's what everyone's arguing about. And bad focus is a problem, right? Because you can end up applying a pattern that you're mimicking sort of inappropriately, right? And that can also happen through lack of research or bad research, right? So there was a sort of a spate of Nikola Tesla books, I think in the 90s, if memory serves. And they were all based on one book. So one person's work got turned into, I think, 4 or 5 books about Nikola Tesla. So obviously the books didn't contain any really interesting information because they all said pretty much the same thing that was in an earlier book. A couple exceptions here and there, you'd pick up a couple good things. I'm sure they made money selling your books. And clearly, look, you know, there's some instances where proper investigation would have stopped a crime, or even listening to crime reports, would have done it, right? But there are other times where everything seems the same, but that isn't true. You think there's a pattern there, but you're not seeing it clearly. You're not seeing correctly the pattern of success. And it creates conspiracies. Because you see a pattern, you assume rationality, and then when you can't reproduce that pattern using your rationality, it's got to be a conspiracy. It's got to be an alternative rationality preventing you from using your rationality to mimic that pattern. And that's a problem, right? And just because that's all you see doesn't mean that's all there is. You don't see Elon Musk sleeping under his desk. You don't see him getting $750,000 from his father to try a bunch of businesses that he failed at. So you can't pin his success on his quote high intelligence. I don't know if he has high intelligence. I have no idea. Never met the man. Wouldn't mind meeting him. I have a cool convo with him, but I don't know if he's smart at all. I have no idea. I don't even care. And the H-1B visa thing proves it, right? It proves a bunch of things. You can be really, really smart at business. You can be really, really smart at a bunch of tech businesses. You can even be a decent programmer because reports are that Elon's a decent programmer now. I probably wouldn't think so for reasons. And you can even be an immigrant and not know anything about immigration policy and how H-1B visa affects it. I did a video on my personal channel, which is just my name. 1.6 thousand views. All because I said H-1B. I didn't even do the SEO tricks on it that I use for navigating patterns, which do kind of work, right? The small boosts. I didn't even do that. Unbelievable number of views. I don't know what's happening. I know I have like well over 100 subscribers, like 125 subscribers on that channel. It hasn't moved in ages, right? Don't know how it got that popular, but very interesting. And it was just an example of perspective and limitation of perspective. And you can check it out if you want. It might be helpful. It might not. I mean, it's a rant. That channel is just for me to rant about everybody destroying my beautiful computer industry on me because they all suck and they should be in prison. Anyway, at least I'm not an extremist. Oh, wait, never mind. Look, if no one holds up the ideal in futility, like knowing it's not going to work, there's nothing worthwhile to mimic. Nothing. Elon Musk needs to be a super smart, superhuman, super person, as does Steve Jobs, even though Steve Jobs is definitely a scumbag. Part of the value of something that you should mimic comes from the difficulty. I mean, this is all throughout the myths and the fairy tales, right? The lazy people with power, it doesn't end well for them, right? Even if they're heroes, like they were born heroes, it doesn't end well for them. Mimicry is about trying to be perfect. Perfection, or the perfect idea of the thing, is what you're trying to mimic. And this looks like beauty and truth. And it could be both and still not be good, right? And that's how people get fooled. Looks good, seems logically consistent, still not truth, different problem, but it must be good. They just infer the third transcendental. That happens a lot. That's why people were surprised by Elon's take on H-1B visas, because they thought he was good. But his perspective on H-1B visas is they work exactly the way he claims for him. That is true. His sample size is mostly him, maybe a few other people who are like him in a particular way, and therefore it works great for them. They don't think they're wrong, and they're not wrong. They're just not looking at the whole picture because you can't. The thing is, like, old business models are still being mimicked. Sometimes, like, a pale imitation of them or like a poor understanding, but everyone's still mimicking Thomas Edison, Westinghouse, Rockefeller, the Vanderbilts, Gillette. I mean, these people are still mimicking these things to this day because they work. Why do authors read other authors? It's best not to do, by the way. And actually, if you look, the authors that aren't particularly well read are typically better authors. Um, just saying. Why do people interact in a community? And this sort of screamer or screeching metal music is just people mimicking the early, good, well sung metal music. That's all it is. And YouTube is full of mimicry. People are just copying what they see or what they think they see, right? Some people are trying to copy Jordan Peterson and they don't see him clearly. See my videos on Jordan Peterson. Those are among my most popular navigating patterns. Still don't have 1.6 thousand views. Why did that video do so freaking well? I have an H-1B visa video coming out for this channel. I just got to sit down and edit it myself, wait for my editor to come back, or get another editor person. But I have one. I'll catch up. I've been catching up. I got a couple of videos. I got to edit the grand animation at some point. That's a mess. So that's all I have to say about that. Let me go through some comments here. I would say, Dawn, let me do a live survey here. I would say it's a very heavy smoky, but I mean, like at the bottom, it's all aftertaste really. The odor is stronger than the smoky flavor in Carolina Lapsang. It's quite a good tea. All their teas are excellent. Steve and Jennifer do an excellent job with their tea. Ixon scientists may have to try to compress time for their models, but it's another layer of flattening. Yeah, well, science is very flat. And when you flatten things, it can be very useful, right? Like get down to brass tacks, so to speak. Right. So if you follow the science, you're mimicking a flat model. Right. Right. And people say follow the science. What are you talking about when you say follow? What are you're talking about mimicry? Right. Don't do the math for yourself. Don't go look at the white papers on your own. I already looked at them all, by the way, long before this happened. So I already knew masks didn't work because that's been in the literature forever for anybody who looked. So of course you have to follow us. And again, the problem is that is technically correct for a bunch of things. He's back Call of Duty. Yeah, sorry about that. First time I've had to do that. So, hopefully it was the only time I'll do that. Although, probably not. Probably other things will come up in the middle of my live stream that I have to take care of. So, people making hybrids instead of incremental improvement. Exactly. Hey, incremental improvement's boring. It's rote. It's repetitive. That's also when you do your best contemplation, meditation, and prayer. Huh, weird. Nah, couldn't be connected. Um, yeah, incremental improvement is way more reliable, more consistent, and creates longer lasting things than this radical, I'm going to be a hero style improvement. Improvement for what? Right. Right. Improvement for what? Anything. Let's make phones better by making phones do everything. Yeah, that was a stupid mistake. The meaning of life is more tech support. Yes. Well, if you make too much tech, it is. Tech support is the meaning of life confirmed. No. Uh, still no. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy confirmed. Well, I mean that's how it ends, right? When you have constant acceleration of NPCs, right? That's how it ends. Right? The NPC-ness consumes itself. And if you look at civilizations, that's how they end. All these other excuses are excuses. That's how they end. They end through excessive mimicry. And that's a better point than mimicry is violence or reliably leads to violence. And that violence reliably leads to death, which is Girard's thesis, which is just completely off the rails insane. That's why he doesn't provide uh, any, examples, right? Young God, is Mark reading top chat and not live chat? I don't know. I don't know what top chat is. I only have one chat. Sorry. What is top chat? Oh, live chat. That's a YouTube thing. I don't have access to that. Sorry, bro. I don't read everything. Maybe you haven't noticed. I don't see any difference between live chat and the stuff I read, though. So I think you just have high expectations. Yeah, if you guys want to hear more about the reprehensible Girard and stuff, I could go through my Girard notes. But he's worth skipping. So if you want to jump in, feel free to do so. I will try. YouTube's being broken again. You guys, you're such freaking geniuses with the placement of gadgets in your UI. You should get a medal. So how many people have Sam Pell? How many people are dressed up as pirates? It's all mimicry, baby. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with it. Like we want to do that. We should do that. That's how we get along. That's why politeness is important. I'm hoping to have a chat with Rachel Fulton Brown about politeness. That should be our next topic. I have to email her about that. I was busy on her live streams doing what I do. She had me watch one of her videos on myths, so I took my notes and sent them over. So hopefully she's finding them helpful. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. See what happens. Should be a good year this year. Sally Joe, how many people suspect Muppets? All of them, I hope. Muppets are everywhere. We're all Muppets. That's the problem. We're all trying to do stuff we can't do. Look at acting as a career. This is mimicry. Sometimes you're mimicking a real person. Sometimes you're mimicking a bunch of propositions on a page. Right? It's maybe the ultimate form of mimicry even. Doesn't make it good. I'm just saying. Doesn't make it bad. It just mimicry is everywhere. You'd be surprised. Once you start looking for it, you're like, wait a minute. My camera is still screwed up. I keep trying to fix it. It never fixes itself. I don't know why. I thought I made a bunch of. Oh, you know what? I did make a bunch of adjustments, but maybe some of them didn't work out. Posted 2 videos on my personal channel a couple of days ago, one right after the other. Sally Joe, acting is the lowest of professions. Yes, according to the ancient Greeks, it is. But look, that's because deception's involved, and you have professional deceivers. That's why when people like take actors seriously when they make political statements, I'm just like, are you kidding me right now? These people put on a show for you by deliberately deceiving you. Why would you listen to and believe anything they have to say? I wouldn't. I'm just saying. I think if I met an actor personally, I wouldn't. I just wouldn't believe anything that he was telling me or she. I just wouldn't. I would be like, eh, no thanks. I'd be polite. And yeah, that's what politeness is for, right? To give you time to assess and contrast to do the assessment. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the politeness discussion. It's gonna be good. You need a baseline. You need to set a baseline. You need a standing point and a starting point, right? To build a relationship with somebody, right? And some of that involves mimicking these, we'll call them neutral patterns, um, so that you can, you know, create a higher quality relationship or not, right? You can decide like, this is the relationship I want or not, right? Do I upgrade it to a genuine friendship or whatever, right? That's what politeness is for. And without that in a society, I don't see how you do it. Like I don't see the alternative. It's not. Actors and entertainers are the lowest caste. Yeah, they are. They're cast with an E. But yes, we should cast them out. How's that? That would be a better plan. But I can see the appeal of Girard, especially because Girard's a sorcerer. He's very good at it. Also, there's no such thing as non-reprehensible French intellectuals, as near as I can tell. So there's that. Everybody like lionizes France. I'm like, freaking really? Like my ancestors left to hunt beavers in the woods with no women. I don't know what to tell you about how good France was, but it couldn't have been that good. My goodness. You know the weather in southern France is like beyond perfect. Why would anybody leave? Only the Parisians. Only the Parisians could do that to peoples. Can confirm. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Girard is such a crazy person, but he's a good sorcerer, and he is talking about the two most important and undiscussed things of our modern age, or something, right? Of the I mean modern, I mean here and now, right? See my video on modernity, right? And the word modern and why it's so terrible. But the here and now, in the here and now, right in the here and now, sacrifice, right? And mimicry are the two big things, which is scapegoat and nomadic desire for him, but those are tiny subsets, like embarrassingly tiny subsets. Ixnay, talented sorcerer, maybe not, definitely not good. No, he's not good. You can't sit there and say Satan critiques God, the Holy Spirit critiques, I forget what he said. Therefore, Satan and the Holy Spirit are the same. What? No, that's A, that's not how that works. B, your statements of facts are actually fundamentally incorrect. Like, I don't know why you would say such a silly thing. And then go, I'm a Christian. What? I don't know what that means. Also, yeah, I'm a Christian means you're a Gnostic, as far as I can tell. Um, yeah, hold fast to your Anglo-Catholicity. And if you're a Protestant, just cut it out. That's all I got. Yeah, Girard is very tricky. Like some of the stuff he says is just, and the thing is, it sounds good. Like everything he says sounds good. Sounds great. Right? Yeah. The reason for violence is, that 4-year-old has something and the 2-year-old wants it, and then the 4-year-old doesn't want to give it up, and the 2-year-old wasn't going to play with it anyway. And all of that happens. I agree. But even in children, it doesn't end with violence, and it certainly doesn't end with a murder, a collective murder. And he plays very fast and loose with words like civilization and collective and things like that. And I'm like, why are you playing so fast and loose with these words? I don't know. And he morphs what he's saying, right? So he starts out with saying, well, there's a scapegoat and, he's a victim, but he's guilty. Like he actually starts out with scapegoat guilty, and then he goes to scapegoat neutral, and then he goes to scapegoat innocent. And then he says, there's no way to resolve this until Jesus gets crucified on the cross. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, did you forget to take some vital medication this morning? Or did maybe you take something that wasn't prescribed? I don't, it's got to be one of those two things. And Girard just proceeds from there. And I'm like, no, like, where are you getting this from? And he can't give you any examples. That's the other part. He tells this whole myth. I forget what the myth is called. He tells a whole myth in the David Cayley interview. And he says, see, they blame that one guy for the plague. And it wasn't his fault. And I'm like, how do you know that? That's not evident from the story that it wasn't his fault. I'll tell you what is evident is that it could have been, because they stone him and the plague dies. He could have been the carrier. I don't know. Why would you assume that? Why did you assume innocence? There's no evidence that he's innocent. You're just projecting that onto the character. It's like, are you freaking? You're going to let him get away with this in an interview? Really? You didn't push back at all. And he didn't. You didn't push back one whit. And I was like, you're a lunatic. You're a lunatic. Oh, no. It's not. Are you going to make me do my realm of transformative coupling video? I'm not doing it now. I would have to synthesize that on the fly because I haven't put those two things together. And of course, no one can do such a thing. So I'll do it now. So the concept behind the realm of transformative coupling is that you've got the archetypes, and that's what you're trying to get to because they're the perfect ideals of whatever, right? They're an archetype could be a bunch of patterns, right? Or a bunch of exemplified qualities. Okay. The way the Catholics and the Orthodox do this is through the saints, right? So you couple to the spiritual realm through the saints. Pretty straightforward. I mean, there's other ways to do it, but for the sake of going with archetypes and with mimicry, you mimic the qualities of one of the saints, right? Whichever one you need the most, or however many that may be, 20, 30, however many flaws you have. So you mimic that, and that brings you closer, right? That brings you further up the ladder to God or something. So the transformative coupling is always related to the spiritual, right? So proper versus improper middle out thinking. Improper middle out thinking would be, we are the center of the world and everything spins around the center. You don't have to say everything spins around we or me, which is what you mean, by the way, because that's how your brain has to interpret it, because you have a single perspective on yourself, right? You have a single ultimate perspective. It still goes down to one, you. A proper way of talking about that, of middle out thinking, is to say, man is in the middle between heaven and earth and weaves or knits the two together. Right. And that's still middle out. And the reason why you won't make that mistake, if you're Anglo-Catholics, for example, is because you understand that it all started with creation and that being is good, right? Being is good. That's the justification for creation, right? God, who is good, wanted to create more goodness and being. So God creates being and a place for being to be, and then being itself, right? Boom. What is that being? Oh, that's the middle. That's the center of the world that knits heaven and earth together. Okay? So, why is that important? Memes can't do that, right? Memes go up into the realm and then fall straight back down again, right? Because they're just word plus picture or something. And so they don't make it through the transform. I mean, maybe one or two of them could, right? Let's not deal with exceptions. I know there's exceptions to everything. That's also called imperfection, by the way. Just to let you know. Like a single system to rule them all doesn't exist, and therefore the world is imperfect, and therefore bringing up the fact that any system is imperfect is like saying gravity exists. Like this is not an interesting fact of the world. So memes don't go anywhere, right? Because they don't communicate reliably, stably, and consistently, especially not across time, right? And so there's heavily context required, heavily reliant on context, heavily. What you want to do is mimic a pattern that's lasted. Now, patterns that last, from your perspective, have to be patterns you don't have human living exemplars for. The saints. Just one example, right? Patterns from stories that you've heard, right? That would include patterns from books or unfortunately comic books, right? Patterns from people on your journey, roughly your age or whatever, or going through something similar that you went through. Those are the only patterns you really have access to for successful patterns. Now, when you live in a world of mostly contrarians who are doing nothing but creating hybrids, to your earlier point, and creating chaos, right? Because that's the same process ultimately. What ends up happening is you're creating a bunch of new things. They're not going to last. You don't know when or how they're going to break, but they're not going to last. And if you mimic those, you may meet with quite a bit of success, right? But you're also going to fall into patterns you don't understand. This is what I keep trying to explain to people. I know you see a conspiracy, but actually, this is an inevitable pattern. It happens every time somebody does this. It doesn't matter what the this is, right? It can be pretty much anything, right? Because the world, just like reality, is just a bunch of patterns at some level, and you're going to follow one or more of them. And if you're not deliberate about it, right? Or you're deliberate about not following patterns work, we might call those religious patterns, for example, then, you're going to end up with bad results. Let's suppose you start up a company, you get lucky on YouTube, you start hiring people, and then you rely on those people, so you shield them, and then they turn out to be bad people, right? Like, because that happens all the time to Mr. Beast. So you're trying to get through the transformative coupling through the mimicry because you don't want to have to derive all this stuff. So you can't, you can't, right? Like it's not possible. So you're always subconsciously mimicking a bunch of things. And mimicry isn't unique to humans, right? Animals mimic too. And there's a lot of dust up around, do they do it better or worse? There's all these wackadoo things. Like there's a big test where they do a human will mimic all the steps of a complicated process, even when it's quote only the last step that matters. This is the scientific reductionism, whereas an ape won't. And so they see this as some grand sign of something, and it's like, yeah, it's probably a grand sign of lack of memory, but they don't account for that because they don't think of these things. Like they just don't think about these things from the right perspective, so they screw it up all the time. All the time. Awaken the Muppet Crisis. Christians, bad term, are meant to image Christ and not mimic each other. Yeah, but we have to mimic each other because it's all we have. Christ is not here. And that's why, again, this is where all the problems come from. Like mimicry doesn't solve a problem. It's just the way we are. And yeah, we're supposed to mimic Christ in all things or something, right? Isn't that? But A, you can't. B, all you have is a translation that you're necessarily interpreting. Right? You have a interpretation that was written down, that was translated and interpreted, that you then interpret. Like there's a lot of fuzziness in these things for that reason, right? Um, oh no, we're gonna get into theological arguments. Ixnam, Paul did say, "Follow me as I follow Christ." Yeah, I, I think you can mimic the saints. I mean, that's what they're there for. So, and this is the problem. Like, you need exemplars and sometimes very specific ones because you can't. We're gonna do hold the whole image of Christ in your head all day so that you can mimic every. That's not happening. This is that empathy trick people play. Empathy is real. No, it's not. Empathy is an idea of arrogance and condescension. Well, not condescension. Um, arrogance and superior caste. That's what empathy is. Unless you're a mother with a child under the age of 5, then you can empathy all day long. Totally valid. So we kind of miss that part, right? And you sort of got to work on yourself in pieces sometimes, right? I don't know how many at once. It sort of depends on you, but you got to work on yourself in pieces. Just is what it. I mean, it's the way it is. So there's not much I can do about that. And these are the problems we're dealing with, but these are all the problems of religion that religion deals with. All right, no matter which religion it is, it addresses these sorts of things, and nothing else does. That's why everything else is an ideology or a cult. Right? Cults are generally personality based. Ideologies are generally idea based. But the difference between a cult and an ideology, other than that, yeah, I don't think there is one. I think cults are more personality. Right. And ideologies are more ideas or sets of ideas. And usually people come to ideologies on their own. Like everybody makes the ideas have possessed them. Yeah, but the ideas that possess you are usually your own. Right. Now, whether or not they were led into you by another person is a different issue. And you may think that there's a big difference there, but actually no, because you aren't led by everybody that you talk to. Right. So there's got to be some voluntary component there at the very least. And if you're empty, if you don't have a set of ideas to mimic already, then you're going to be more prone to mimicking the ideas that come along. Like, it's just, if there's nothing filling that space, something will fill that space eventually. Like, sorry, like, yeah, the negative space thing really important, and we don't recognize it. We don't recognize it. What's someone trying to do? We'll figure out who they're following or who they're mimicking, right? Then you'll know what's going on. And you'll know how it's going to go for them once you talk to them. You talk to Pastor Paul Vanderklay for 20 minutes and you'll figure out real quick he doesn't understand Peterson and he's trying to do what Peterson does. And he said it explicitly to some extent, or he's trying to do something like what Peterson does, but fill a gap. Okay, bro, what does Peterson does? Oh, you don't know. You maybe have some of it, right? But the magic's not there. You got to understand the magic. Because I'll tell you something, Peterson does some interesting magic. Real interesting. And I do have videos on that on the channel. So check it out on Navigating Patterns. See the videos on what Peterson did. Awakened Muppet Crisis. Proper mimicry is done in faith. Well, I would say all mimicry is done in faith because you don't know if it's going to work. I mean, you mimic your parents because you have no choice, but you don't know that that's going to work. And that's the problem. Like, and there's no filter for good mimicry. That's the problem. There's no filter for it because there's also, with the exception of people who are dead, or spirits as such, angels or whatever, there's no perfect people. So whoever you mimic, you shouldn't mimic all of what they're doing anyway. Right. And so you got to pick a subset. And now the errors just stack up, guys. It doesn't get any better. Right. You're better living in the struggle and accepting the struggle and the trade-offs rather than trying to over perfect them with systems, right? Build systems that allow you to participate in trade-offs and understand trade-offs. Don't build systems that try to protect you from the inevitable imperfections, mistakes, and errors. Like, that's a waste. That's just a waste. And that's what we've been trying to do. And when we find out those systems haven't been working, like in the UK, man, the dust up in the UK is a disaster. It's a disaster. What are they going to do in the UK? Oh, this has been going on for decades. Oh, the government knew this was going on for decades. Oh, the government was participating in many cases. And then, they made fun of us for Epstein. Okay, bro. How's that working out for you? We're still better. We're still better. Why? Why do you do this to me? Sally Joe, can't do everything, Mark. That does that because that would get awkward fast. Yeah. Yeah, Sally, it sure would. Sally's an expert at trying to do everything. He's an expert at it. And it does get awkward pretty fast, especially when everyone's telling you, no, don't. We don't want to watch. It's poor Sally. Poor me. Oh, poor me having to watch that train wreck. It's better now though, so and that's what people don't want to do is the hard work. The hard work is often just watching the train wreck after signaling the train to stop and it not stopping. Yeah, that's the hard work. Everything else is easy. Watching it all unfold, watching people get stuck in their little mimic patterns and then they can't get out, and you're just like, on my early model videos, that playlist, we've got articles about that on the Mark of Wisdom. If you don't want to watch the videos, um, that's actually super important. Sally Joe, remember that one time you said don't get a Twitter account? That was hysterical. That was completely hysterical. Manuel and I were both sitting there saying, Sally, you don't need to be on Twitter. You don't want to be on Twitter. You shouldn't be on Twitter. We'll tell you everything from Twitter that you should be exposed to on Twitter so that you don't need an account. 5 minutes later, she's got an account. She's telling us about it. And we're like, we just literally told you 6 times, do not get a Twitter account under any circumstances. I don't know. Dawn. I asked Jacob if the grooming gang story is exploding now because JBP interviewed Tommy Robinson, and he said no, it's because Elon Musk just found out about it. I mean, it's entered the zeitgeist. It's both. I don't know what. Jacob doesn't like woo, I'm sure, so he doesn't get it. um, who broke that open? Was it Tommy Robinson? Was it Sagan of Akkad? Was it Peterson, or was it Musk? All of them did it though, right? Like, it's from all of them. So Joe, I was just so convinced you said get one. Literally told you not to do it in no uncertain terms, both of us, independently and together, several times, like half a dozen. And somehow out of that, you managed to get one anyway. Unbelievable. That was funny. That was completely hysterical. Completely hysterical. I bumped my thing. Oh no, I'll never get it back. It will never be straight again. I'll fix it later. It'll be fine. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And when you like, mimicry is so useful because it saves you so much time. And AI is all mimicry. The whole thing. The whole thing. It's just mimicry galore. I'm just going to shut my camera off real quick and fix this because one of the disadvantages to having OCD is stuff like that makes you completely insane than you already were, in my case. And so you have to fix it. Like, you have no choice but to fix your You're a monocle when you bump it and it goes crazy on you. It's just it's a requirement of life at that point. There we go. Okay. I should probably update that picture, huh? Where's my camera? There it is. Okay. Yeah, much better. Now it's fixed. It's not like sitting off in my peripheral, my excellent, unfortunately excellent peripheral vision where I see every little inconsistency and movement. I have to convince myself not to get too distracted. Oh my goodness. I just notice everything. I was in the bathroom the other day looking for a brush, a little tiny brush for my razor, the speck of black. And I'm like, oh, that's a brush. And I was right. It was behind like 4 things. And I'm just like, I don't think other people can do that. How unfortunate for them. Just got my brush and cleaned my razor. Ixnay. Are you crazy? Don't go between them. Go between them? Are you crazy? Indiana Jones on the Last Crusade. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. This, I don't know. I was thinking about this earlier too, because I've been rewatching Bab 5. And it came up today. Tic Tac Toe came up today somehow. And I was just like, this is all answered in old movies. Like, I don't, why are we, Bab 5 is great philosophy. Oh my God. Such good philosophy and religion. So good. So good. Dawn. I allow myself to read stuff on X and click on the heart. I mean, no posting and no commenting. Still not sure I should be there at all. You should be to read all my awesome posts on X and become enlightened. Somebody on X was like, this happened like this week too. They were like, you should put together a compendium of your Age of Gnosis quotes. I'm like, bro, I already have one. And he's like, oh, like, yeah, we're on it. That's gonna be Substack articles someday. Actually, I was looking for a bunch of stuff because I'm working on my book. I did not finish by the end of the year, but I'll finish soon enough. It's good to have goals. Aim high, fall far. That's a good strategy. And I found my Age of Gnosis Substack draft, which I wrote, probably 9 months ago or something silly, and worked on it a little, whatever. But now I'm like, oh yeah, here it is. Now I can fire up the Substack and get my Age of Gnosis stuff together, and because now I have enough of it, I think I can probably. Is there anything else I need to frame? I think there's anything else I need to frame that I don't already have planned for the live streams or the recorded videos. In other words, it's all stuff I've thought about. And by thought about, I mean figured out how to convey to people that don't get anything. Because that's really what I'm dealing with all the time. Because I just look out and I go, how did you not know it? Like the H-1B visa thing really bothered me. Because I'm just like, and the number of not serious arguments. The number of mini arguments I got to in the comment section of my personal channel. I'm like, no, bro, you aren't hearing what I'm saying at all. Like, it does do what they say. They are correct when they say the workers here are lazy. That is actually true. But also there's misaligned incentives. So you've got to account for all that. And the bigger argument we need to be having about everything, or discussion about everything, is trade-offs. Is it worth having all the best people here, in theory, in an ideal world or whatever, if we bring in, 10% of our population from India or something, right? Like if we augment our population by 10% with people from a single other culture, is it worth it? And that's the problem. Like nobody wants to have that conversation. That's the conversation we need to have. But first we need, Elon needs to know, bro, I get that H-1B works for you, but it's not working for a bunch of other people who aren't you. And that's that's the problem. The idea that you can bring, I mean, it's right in the bill too. But the idea that you can bring people into a market and increase the supply and not impact the price, I'm like, all right, I get the dumb, but if you're this dumb, we need to sequester your job types, right? We need to. Like, and if you're not that dumb, you're malicious, in which case we need to sequester your job types when you get out of prison. Either way, I'm fine. But since we know we need to sequester the job types, let's just do that immediately and worry about the prison part later. Right? Do the immediate thing. I'm gonna have a whole video on that at some point. Like, everyone's like, we don't have all the facts. It's like, yeah, but you only need a small subset of facts to take an action. You may need to take additional actions later as you get more facts. Different problem. Sally Joe insists that scrolling the worst things that are happening in the world doesn't make you a better parent or a better person. That is true. Sally Joe, it takes a lot to put your attention to something you affect. Right. Until that's your habit, then it's normal. That's a really good point, Sally. Yeah. Right. The real problem is people are moving their attention away from the things they should and could be doing because that means work for them, and work means consequences. And also, I can define work as directed time, energy, and attention. I was like, yeah, that definitely works. So I was happy with that little revelation today. I was like, yeah, that's good. We'll just use that. I don't think there's a better definition anyway. So, and work is the thing that you leverage that people see as power. How much power it is depends on what they see, partially, right? You see this sort of trope in science fiction a lot, right? Where you've got the quote powerful wizard and you don't see his power. That goes back to anonymity. And anonymity is such a corrosive thing. People have no idea. They keep defending it. I'm like, do you understand what you're doing? I mean, why would you do this? I don't know. There's no hope for people. No hope. I'm just saying. It's all mimicry all the way down. That's why you see all these NPCs, right? This is why ideologies are dangerous, right? They're systems that people get into and everybody mimics everybody else because you have to mimic the people around you. This is how undercover work operates, right? You undercover drug dealer, you deal drugs. Why? You got to mimic the people around you, otherwise they won't think you're one of them. It's not that hard, right? It's not that hard. But yeah, that's how it works. It's not. People are hopeless without miracles, but miracles happen. Well, and that's what everybody wants, right? It's a good point, but that's what everybody wants. They want to be broken out of the pattern. The problem is if you're not in the pattern, in other words, you don't have some boring, rote cog machine thing to do every day, the number of miracles available to you is minuscule because you have no contrast to see them. If your day is full of exciting things, when exciting things happen, they'll just be Tuesday. And that's the blindness of the elite class. I mean, that's the trope of let them eat cake, which is possibly one of the most misunderstood and mischaracterized stories in history. But that's the trope. The trope is they have all the stuff that we don't have, and therefore they don't see what we don't have. To some extent, right? That can be true. It's not necessarily true, right? Because what you're really doing is trading struggles. And you kind of see that with Downton Abbey, right? Like this woman can't get married because she's a mess. There's just too many choices. The poor woman takes the first guy that'll have her, gets it over with, right? Because the choice strategy doesn't give you better people on average, but it actually gives you worse people on as studied. This is the other thing. Like you can look this stuff up. Like I did. That's why I say it. It's not that hard. It's not a trick. I'm not Curtis Yarvin or Destiny who just makes things up. All the guy he's never stated a true fact in his life. Not publicly that I could tell. Every time he says something, I'm like, yeah, but that's not actually true, bro. That's it's gamer true. Right. Ugh. I game 10 hours a day. Okay, then you probably can't know anything about politics. You're spending all your time. I don't like boring jobs. You're spending all your time on video games. These video games are boring, really? Come on, come on. How many video games are there? There can't be that many anymore. Really? Nuts. It's a big problem when you listen to a bunch of I mean, everyone's reached their limits, right? Like James Lindsay just reached his flat world limit. He can only see left and right. And all he's doing is putting a bunch of former lefties who are now, quote, moderates in the category of right and calling them woke. I'm like, no, they were always woke because all leftists are woke or will become woke over time. All of them. It's inevitable. It's a pattern. We've seen it over and over again, right? And then Lindsay made some stupid comment. He's never engaged with me, oddly enough. Actually, I find that quite odd, actually, because I'm fairly supportive of his good work. And usually just silent on his bad work. Although recently he's gone after Carl Benjamin. And Carl Benjamin's wrong too. It's like they've just all reached their limit. They've reached the limit of what they can understand or what they've spent time understanding. And now they're just smashing into each other, right? And so where you saw unity, H-1B visas really highlighted this, right? You see all the division now, right? Because those flat worlds are colliding into one another. They're colliding. Awakening the Muppet Crisis, sexual revolution equals worst form of mimicry. I mean, all these things are damaging. Was it the worst? No, I think whatever drove it to happen was the worst. The mimicry is not optional, right? The thing is, we have to acknowledge it. If you live in individualism land where you think the individual is the center of the world, Jordan B. Peterson, this is for you, right? You're middle out thinking in a bad way. Because if the individual is of primary importance, then the sexual revolution is correct. Unfortunately, we know that's not true because we've seen the results. And that's where everyone gets confused. Like, that's the thing. I don't know why they get confused there, because you would think, oh, the data's in, right? But I mean, people do climate all the time. Al Gore's book was wrong. All the predictions in it were wrong. Every single one of them was flat out incorrect. And we're still talking about this. Every single model, every single prediction, every single thing to come out of those climate retards was wrong. All of it. It was all wrong. We've got all these pictures of, all of these various places, right? In the ocean, and there's no sea level rise for 200 years. None. It's just like, I don't know what's wrong with you people. And we get a bunch of more recent stuff. Like, here it is in 1950. Here it is today. Do you see a difference in sea level? No. That's because there isn't one. Right? Oh, man. Sally Joe. Video games are like jobs, except you get fake internet achievements and pay to earn them with your soul because they are pure Satan. Tell me how you really feel, Sally. Also, I don't think you're too far off there, for sure. Yeah, this is the play stupid games, win stupid prizes trope that Tim Pool used to talk about all the time. I'm like, exactly. And it's sort of like the end result tells you whether or not you had a good system. And that's why you need to mimic patterns that have persisted, because there's lots of patterns and most of them will not persist. And that's what religion's supposed to do, at least in theory, and I think does quite well, right? Is give you those patterns that have persisted in various different ways, too, which to me is super duper helpful. Sally Joe, that's a PG version for the, but yeah, don't get Sally Joe in a room uh, on the video game rant, because it won't end well. It won't end well. Your ears will be scarred for life. Possibly, possible brain damage might result. I take no responsibility other than having warned you. There are few things worse, because people mimic the video games. How do you mimic a video game? Well, you've got this clear set of rules. It's totally consistent and reliable, or way more consistent and reliable than any set of rules in we'll say outside of video games. How's that? And then you expect the world to be that way. And when the world isn't that way, you get very upset. Very, very upset. Also, all of your feedback in a video game comes from the environment. It doesn't come from other people. Right? And so now you're not used to getting feedback from other people. And that makes you look autistic. It doesn't make you autistic in that way, but it makes you have the symptoms of autism. So video games will increase the instance of autism just because mimicry. It's inevitable too. It's like, it's not a problem to be solved, right? Except shut the stupid game. We got a Blu-ray player. Came today, like an hour before the stream. I'm in the other room setting up the Blu-ray player. So I'm setting up this Blu-ray player on the big TV that we have, and a nice 75-inch TV. And I've got two video game machines. I've got an Xbox 360 R2D2 edition. So it's an Xbox 360. It looks like R2D2. It's freaking cool. I've convinced my best friend to buy one too. It's a really good deal when it came out. Really good deal. Fantastic deal. It came with Star Wars The Force and the little, I forget what it's called, but they got a camera and you could do this and it would do the Force thing in the video game. And so you could do like Jedi powers. I didn't play it that much actually because I'm not a big video gamer. But it was hella fun. It was another game with a catapult. You do this and it would bring the arms of the catapult back, and then you launch the thing at the castle. It was freaking awesome. But I never use it. And I racked up hours of World of Tank. Hours of play. I mean, I had a decent game going there. I was never really good at it. I had a decent game going there. Level 6, Hellcat, baby. I had a souped up Hellcat. But I never play it anymore because everyone's off of that, and I have a PS4. And for the past, I don't know, 6 years, the PS4 has been primarily used. I did a lot of World of Tanks on it, just never as much as the Xbox 360. Primarily used for media display. That's it. Just use it to make the TV do stuff. And I had Disney. I still have the Disney characters and stuff. I did this little Disney thing. You put the characters on, and then they pop in the game. It was very cool. And they had all these little mini games that were like in-world games. So they weren't really video games in that way. They were different types. What's that stupid freaking phone game? Farm whatever. The farming games, like the farming games. So they had one of those games. And yeah, I built up a few hours here and there, right? I had this nice little thing. And then they freaking pulled the servers. And I was pissed. Man, was I pissed. That World of Tanks. Why are you guys doing this to me? You couldn't transport your tanks from Xbox 360 over to PlayStation. All that time wasted. Those beautiful tanks. I had to build them all back up again from scratch. Total pain. not happy. Still not happy. Still very upset about this. But when you mimic that stuff and then you come into the real world, like, oh, it's horrible. It's horrible. Oops. Sally Joe, you become what you practice. Yeah, well, those are you atrophy all your other skills in favor of the ones you use the most. It's not. Return to arranged marriages. One of the most important decisions of your life is going to be made for you via distributed cognition. Yeah, well, true. True. There's a big case there for sure. And I would, you know, I would fight on either side of that issue because it's a fun issue, right? I don't think it's necessarily resolvable, but as near as I can tell, there's never been a time period in history where there were only arranged marriages, ever. And it's odd because the people who argue about these things were never in the classes that did them. And I'm always like, this was never an issue for somebody born in your station anyway. Why do you care? You feel bad for the elitists you don't like, or at least claim you don't like. Is this your argument? Because I got questions about your argument. And people don't see these little. I'm gonna do videos on all these little things. I had a bunch of insights today, and I couldn't write them down. I was outside listening to um, what was it? Listen to a bunch of things. I listened to some In Excess, excellent. And then I was like sad, right? Because I'm like, I think it's Michael Hutchinson was the lead singer of In Excess. I was like, I have this great music. I really like this particular album. It's absolutely fantastic. Was it worth him dying for though? Because Jimi Hendrix, same thing, right? Like, I don't know. I was listening to Matchbox 20, Bright Lights. Ah, Bright Lights is a great song. It's a great song. I love it. I was listening to Metal Church, one of the greatest metal bands of all time. That's why the scream metal guys, it's like, no, you want power. Iron Maiden, power vocals. If you don't have power vocals, you scream into the mic. That's how that works. But they were mimicking, because I've seen those bands live in small venues. They were mimicking these other bands. Someone, who was it? What was it called? Shadows Fall. When I was up in New England, I saw Shadows Fall. They had some original music, but they were a Metallica cover band. Quite good. Quite good. I mean, not great, but they were good. So, but they were just mimicking things. I mean, most music is mimicry. Like everybody used to mimic Zeppelin in the 80s, right? Until grunge comes around, basically. There's other things going on, but right, the Beatles were mimicked for decades, right? And yeah, it's on and on and on with this. Sally Joe, at least consult your grandparents' generation for Pede's sake. Who's Pede? Ixnon says yes. Dawn, big discussion about the dating process for Orthodox Jews in Israel on Jacob's stream last night. Yeah, not arranged marriage, but the parents are heavily involved. They should be. What do you know about yourself and who's good for you? You don't know anything about yourself and who's good for you. You're a moron. You know how long it took me to figure out a bunch of things? Like, oh, I actually have negative desire to be around somebody who's smart in the way I think I would like, because that's actually the wrong answer. Like, that's actually the wrong answer. And I didn't, yeah, I didn't know that. My parents are divorced. So, it's not. Musicians are crazy artists with no self control. Oh, yeah, Sally's gonna love that. Sally Joe never watched Heath Ledger Batman because it killed him. Yeah. Loved him in A Knight's Tale. I think I saw A Knight's Tale. William, oh, good to see you, sir. Some bands are better remembered than their careers. Yes. Well, look, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It's hard. I you know, I think most of that music is probably just not good. Just not good. And the individualism is what makes it seem otherwise. Like, and when you start to learn the history of how this music emerged and where it all came, like Led Zeppelin, all of their songs were like 50 years old when they started playing them, basically. Right. And then as they evolved, they're still just stealing stuff from American blues. Like they talk about this. This isn't a secret. And what they're doing is they're just doing American blues with new instruments. You know, Jimmy Page, as well as he did it, was not the first to take a bow to an electric guitar, which is an innovation, right? And then you see, like, if you ever want to see like mimicry to the next level, listen to some Led Zeppelin. Doesn't really matter. None of the really good stuff. Like, you could do Kashmir, right? Don't listen to 10 Years Gone or In My Time of Dying, right? But most of their good popular stuff in Kashmir, and then go listen to Whitesnake, and then we'll chat, and then realize Coverdale Page was an album, right? They had an album, and it's fantastic. By the way, that album's fantastic. Like, it's just a good album. I love that album. It's fantastic. First CD I bought, only because it was $6 at the time, and I was like, "Oh, I'll buy a $6 CD." I'm just not buying a $15 CD because I'm not a retard. So, still haven't paid $15 for a CD. Bring back CDs. Sally Joe. Also, insane parents are not trying to help kids figure out jobs or spouses. No, they're individuals. It's worse, Sally. Like, you just give them the choices and they make the choices. And then the responsibility is not yours as a parent anymore. And they can't complain because they had full choice. Like, that's how to parent, obviously. Oh, and we've had 2 generations of that. So what do we have now? We have Destiny, who thinks he's intelligent, but and if you mimic smart people and you're not good at logic, reason, and rationality, you get Peter Boghossian. Like, I don't know. Like, see my commentary on the Boghossian Peugeot video. What a catastrophe. What a mess. Poor Peter. Man, I'd love to just sit down and have a pizza with Peter and like chat or whatever. I would equally love to destroy him in a conversation, but different kind of love. I'd rather do the first one and never do the second one, but also I'm open. I'm open to the second one. Oh, the poor guy. Like, you're not good. You're just not good at what you think you're good at. That's all. You just amateur time. Amateur time. And a lot of that is mimicry, right? Oh, this is how it's done. Why is James Lindsay stuck? He's mimicking a pattern he used before that was successful once. And it wasn't his pattern. 3 of them did it. Right. It's maybe he can't do that pattern, but I have no idea. Right. Maybe he can. But that pattern doesn't work everywhere. And in fact, he screwed it up when he redid it recently, right? He rewrote part of the Communist Manifesto, and Carl Benjamin pointed out to him, well, but Marx's formula is not wrong. All the facts he plugs into it are wrong, right? It's sort of like the Fibonacci sequence, only you start with 2, and then the Fibonacci sequence formula can be applied, but the numbers you get don't have the quality of the Fibonacci sequence anymore, because the quality is the result of the pattern plus what's in the pattern. That's why you don't bring down the gatekeeping system in academia. You just fix it. Why doesn't everybody see this? Why? Why am I here? Feel like I'm crying in the wilderness. I appreciate all you guys, but like, we're gonna get everybody in the world on this. This isn't that hard. Everyone's like, well, first we've got to calculate the 4th trigonometric derivative. And it's like, no, bro, just fix it. Like, it's not that hard. Like, what are you doing? What do you do? The UK grooming scandal. You don't need courts for that. Oh, you publicly made this statement, you go to prison. Okay, done. Just put them in prison. They publicly made statements. You don't need a court for that. That's a waste of court time. I mean, pay lawyers a lot of money, but you're just going to let a lot of innocent people off who already admitted to their guilt. If you already admitted publicly that you did nothing, then you get nothing, and we take all your stuff and throw you in prison. Problem solved. This is always how it's been done in history, by the way. Always. Most people that can go to court for things that's super recent. Super duper. What do they call that? They call it a litigious society. Well, that's been rising in general in the world for 150 or 200 years. Like, that's not a US thing. Why is the question? Because we've done away with the alternative forms of justice. We're putting all the justice in one system that's government controlled. And that's a mistake. Explicitly, as apparently my friend Manuel found out on his little sojourns, which he just got back from. So there will be a book club tomorrow. Tomorrow? Yeah, Saturday. There will be a book club on language creation. Dawn. Sometime in the last decade or so, I completely lost any desire to own the music I listen to. All right, kick this person off this. How do I boot her forever? I'm fine with Pandora and Spotify. Sold all my CDs. Oh my goodness, Dawn. Come on. I want to own and manage all my own music my way. And I will have it know it. I'm sitting there like, I should build a playlist. And I go, no, you should not build a playlist. You don't need a playlist. You pick music in the moment, in the flow state, which I do. I kept having to stop playing with the chainsaw to select new songs. That's why I picked an album. I'm like, oh, In Excess, good album. I played some Perfect Circle before that. Man, those two songs. Oh. Got two songs about addiction. The Outsider, what's the other one called? Now I don't remember. The Outsider's great though. I mean, those same album. One song in between the two, something like that. Really good songs about addiction. Heroin addicts do a great job, or former heroin addicts, talking about addiction in their music. Just saying. Anyway, it's not. People deny God and want the state to play. Well, I don't. Yeah, but that's the church's fault for receding, dude. Like, come on. The church should not recede, and it should not let the government take its tasks from it. Right? You can't. We know two things. You can't let corporations run hospitals, and you can't let governments run hospitals. And you could say, well, we can't go back. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Boy, should we go back. Like, hospitals run by the religious orders are awesome. Even the Baptist hospital here in Columbia. Wow. I mean, I'm from Boston, man. This was unbelievable. They've got escorts to bring you down the elevator, and it's insane how good they are. Insane how much they pay attention to people and experience. It's nuts. It's just such a difference. I mean, when I grew up, everybody knew which hospitals to go to in New England because there was still hospitals run by the church. And so they were like, yeah, well, you just go to these hospitals because they'll never take your house. Oh, no, these corporations will take your house. Oh, okay. But you're the one that got rid of churches running them who wouldn't take your house. So you kind of caused this. So I don't want to hear it from you. I want you to shut your mouth. That's what I want you to do. Shut up about things you don't know anything about. Shut up about problems you create. Don't brag about the problems you create. That's a bad plan. It's going to piss me off. There's going to be repercussions for that shit. Don't do it. Ixnon, the church should not recede, can confirm. Right. Well, it can stop any time now. That would be great. It doesn't seem to be stopping. It's like, recede at full speed, please. It's like, could you not? Could you just like undo that? That'd be great. Maybe set up a few monasteries. That would be good too. I don't know. Dawn, we got notice today at work that the major, almost monopoly healthcare system and the only hospital in this city are now out of network on our insurance. Oh my goodness, that's awful. I live in a state with one insurance company. So, yeah, not good. That's awful. I mean, I don't. Yeah, yeah. Well, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I mean, they set up the system to fail. Everybody said it. I was there. Everybody said it. Everybody said it. People don't want to listen. And a lot of what we're dealing with is uh, shrapnel from the 90s, right? Like that's really what we're dealing with. This is just fallout from the bad things that were happening in the 90s. And everybody said, see, it works. See, it works. See, it works until it blows up. And then it doesn't work. And you find out that the cost was far higher than you could have imagined. And yeah, I mean, just the stuff that the Clintons did when in office is just like, oh my God. The 2008 housing collapse, where did you think that came from? That came from Bill Clinton, almost directly. Like Bill Clinton completely wrecked the banking industry. He knew what he was doing, right? He's a Rhodes Scholar. It's like, oh yeah, then he's fully responsible for this stuff. He definitely knew better. Definitely. Sally Joe 905 Shrapnel is the Navigating Patterns brand name, or 90S Shrapnel. I don't know what 90S Shrapnel is. It sounds good. Whatever, you're in charge. Have fun. Don't bother me. Trying to write my book. I get the wisdom section done. So the introduction of the book is done. The part on why community is done. The wisdom part's done. I think half the workbooks actually was done a long time ago. It'll need to be completely rewritten at some kind of, right? It'll be completely reformatted. Yeah, I got to do roles, rules, structure, something. Not quite in my head. I didn't work on it at all for the past 2 days. Don't know why. Didn't happen. Did the entire script for the monologue in 2 hours, about 3:30 today. So, yeah. Yeah. About 5.5 hours ago, something like that. I don't know why. Just kind of happened. I have notes. I had notes. We knew what we were doing, so I had some vague notes, and then today I just sat down and went "Brrr," and wrote up a bunch of stuff. Oh no, Ixnon 90S shrapnel merch when? Uh-oh. Sally Joe lol after the Space Dragons get redone. Oh no, you're redoing the Space Dragons. Okay, well, the Space Dragons must be redone, and after I finish the studio. Yep, we'll finish the artwork on the book first, because that's coming up. We're going to be done with that in a couple of weeks for sure. And then everybody can make wisdom communities wherever you are. That's what I want. I want people to make wisdom communities wherever they are. And then I want to win the lottery so I can set up my tea shop. But, we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's going to be a long road to hoe here, but I think this is the year. We're doing all right this year. Everything's starting out pretty good. I'm behind on videos, but that happened because I was in the hospital and over Thanksgiving. Oh, wait, that happened before. Actually, I didn't think of that before. But now that I think I nailed it, I had 2 days this week where I woke up before 8 a.m. and got out of bed and did stuff. Incredibly productive. It was fantastic. 2 in a row. Miracle. And then today I was outside for a good part of the day, grabbing very large trees and chucking them like they were nothing. So, Sally Joe, we can take our propaganda to the universities and plant it there. Yes, well, we can. I got to go back up to Boston soon anyway. We can go to all the universities there and plant propaganda. It'll be wonderful. It'll be wonderful. All right, no takers for Mimicry stream here. We're 2 hours in. Really, nobody wants to join me? No one? Link looks to me like it's been pinned on Navigating Patterns. Nobody. Come on. Jesse's not around. Castle's not around. Sally's almost never around. No Elizabeth today? What's going on? Chucking trees. You're ready for the Highland Games. They have the tartan games here, and they have caper tossing. And I've watched that. It's hysterical. Yeah, so the beaver, who's actually cutting down a tree that I want cut down, has been working on this one tree like right out in front of the picture window, which is kind of good because that tree's got to go anyway. So he chopped it down. First branch he chopped down was held by vines, so it went like this, about 4 feet off the ground. He couldn't get it. I was like, oh, that's hysterical. Then he cut the larger part of the tree down, and that fell. And then I had to go get the chainsaw, and I tried to get the baby electric chainsaw, it's battery powered chainsaw, to work. And that was a disaster. I don't know why. And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with this chainsaw anymore. It worked not too long ago, but now something's weird. I don't know. I've had problems before with it, but I was like, all right, well, I don't know what's wrong with this, so we'll try something else. So I was gonna get the gas chainsaw, and I was like, oh, it needs gas, it needs this, and I'm like, this is a huge chainsaw, and I really just want to cut like a couple of little things. And then I was like, I have an electric pole saw. So then that needed bar oil and chain tightening, and I had to remember how to tighten the chain, and then I got all that done, and then I was able to cut a bunch of branches, cut some trees, and I did just a little bit of stuff. Then I had to haul the branches off because I don't want the beaver dragging them into the pond. So, yeah. Sally Joe trapped on mom time. Yeah, well, we kind of figured that, Sally. Sally's a mimicker, so if she has a chance to jump into the stream, she does it right away. So we kind of figured out she wasn't gonna join us. All right. Any other mimicry questions or things like that? Going once, going twice. No. All right. Well, look, then it's a 2-hour live stream. Thank you everybody for joining. I'm gonna do anonymity and the reasons why it's pure evil. And oh, Dawn, I recorded why museums are evil. I don't know when it'll be out, but that's coming. I believe you're the one that asked for that, so I did it. I had some brain space, so I used it. So yeah, I got my big animation, 2 of the videos recorded. I got to record a bunch more. We're doing this anonymous thing next week, and take some time to think about mimicry because it's going to come up. And yeah, I mean, really think about it because there's implications here that everyone's missing, right? Because everyone's wondering, why is the world so messed up? Well, who are you mimicking, and who's mimicking what, and where did the what come from? Because the world makes a lot more sense there. Awakening to the meaning crisis, best example of mimicry good and best example of mimicry bad. Oh, John says good. Thank you. You're most welcome, ma'am. You are all Muppets. Best example of mimicry good, mimic the Saints. Best example of mimicry bad, mimicking comic books. I mean, it's in what you mimic, right? And how you mimic it. And that's why you need help, right? Because again, the number of people I talk to, kids in particular, like, I'm as smart as Elon Musk, and I never fight them on it. I don't care. Do you sleep under your desk at work? Well, I would never do that. And you're never going to be Elon Musk because he did. So you're not mimicking him correctly. It's that easy. Like, you mimic what you see, and you don't see the world clearly. John, I have to explain why I'm going to. Like, it should be obvious by now, but I get that it's not. Like, I understand, right? But also, you should be able to figure it out. If nobody knows who's giving to charity, there's no one to mimic, and then there's less charity in the world. It's real simple, actually, right? Because it's not enough to know in the abstract. You got to have an example. You need the exemplar. You need a reasonable exemplar. And yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to mimic good and mimic bad, and there's so many reasons why mimicry goes wrong. And that's why you need the distributed cognition. Again, this is what religion is all about. mimicking the patterns that persisted over time that work. That's what you should focus on. So, pattern you mimic now is contemplate and think about where exemplification is, how and why it's important. And then remember cognitive load, right? Because that means you can only make, we'll say, rational, careful, considered decisions about so many of the things that you mimic. And so if people are putting out bad mimic signals, like conspiracy theories, right? Like lots of them in particular, which is what we have now, that's going to fill your brain, right? And you're either going to rely on more mimicry, and the more garbage there is in the world, the more garbage mimicry you're going to get in general in the population, and the more chaos you're going to get, right? At the same time, the things you should be rational about, you're not going to be rational about. It was a family that we did World of Warcraft gaming with. And the husband and wife used to game at the same time all the time. And you hear the kids in the background asking for stuff. It was absolutely heartbreaking for me. Absolutely heartbreaking. And what are those kids going to grow up like? They're probably teenagers by now. Man, I played World of Warcraft a long time ago. I didn't play a lot of it. I was never a big gamer. Mimicry is important. And when you don't have good mimicry in the world, guess what kind of mimicry you have? Look at Lily Phillips. It's all mimicry, right? She's doing it on faith, right? She's taking it on faith that what she thinks she's seen and what she's been told about feminism, about being independent, about sex is correct. And she's mimicking what others have done before her. Right? And if you had fewer signals and most of them were good, you'd have more good people. It's that simple. And you have to, because you're an NPC about many, many things. I don't care who you are. You could be Eric Weinstein. You could be Elon Musk. It does not matter. With respect to so many things, you are an NPC or a zombie. And that's what zombies and NPCs and LARPing all have in common. They're all forms of mimicry. And they're all not optional. They're inevitable. You will have them. That's why being anonymous is dangerous to civilization. It's actually destructive. Ixon, being flooded with signals is inevitable. Without filters, mimic good filters. Yeah. Well, 99% of or 98% of everything is filtered. Just as a human. Like there's so many signals you can't even imagine. You actually cannot imagine. It's not possible. So look, on that note, think about that. This is why anonymity has going to be a good topic to go with next. And hopefully you're all looking forward to that. I know Castle is. And we'll do the book club tomorrow. So that'll be on navigating patterns and Randos United and agapic orientation. So stay tuned for that. And everybody have a great week. Now that I have a Blu-ray player and a bunch of Bruce Lee movies and Blake 7 on Blu-ray, which just came out last month, I know I'm going to have a good week. So take care of yourself and be better. Be